And next, let's hear from Joe Jenkins, now CEO of The Brave Effect, who spent 13 years in federal prisons himself and following his own return, now works helping other former inmates successfully integrate and live fuller and happier lives. Joe, if I may, I'd like to ask first what you might see were the conditions that led or set you up to becoming incarcerated in the first place.
The first thing that comes to mind that I often share with people about the younger version is when I look back is that I was not set up to win. And what I mean by that, I was destined to lose based upon what I seen every day, what I lived in. Of course, my mom, she would tell me the right things to do. As parents, we always tell our children the right things to do, but we don't surround them with the things that they need. And some of us, honestly, and I've learned this as time has gone on, we can't give what we don't have. And so if my mother didn't have and didn't put herself in position to be able to give me something better, then she clearly couldn't provide what I seen when I walked out the door and when I seen some of the choices that she made that wasn't the best choices. Of course, like I said, she would tell me the right things to do. So, but that's not what I saw. And I always share with people the real heroes of a child's life are those that they see coming in and out those doors, and those that's outside of those doors, and the excitement of the drug dealing. We hear that the being amongst murderers and stuff like that and things that happen, we hear that those are the bad things and not the right things to do. And yes, consciously we may know that they're not right, but I've also said and came up with this: who says that it's not right when it's all that I see? How is it not right? One often had asked me before, and they said, well, you knew that going to jail was wrong. I said, did I really? They said, yeah, you did. I said, why? When everybody around me is going to jail. You knew selling drugs was wrong. You knew that the street life was wrong. Well, I hear that it's wrong, but if that's all that I see, then how is it wrong? So it was what I didn't have and what wasn't provided, and what my mother simply didn't position herself. So as I do what I do today, I try to put people in position so that we can give those things, we can give our youth, we can give our families the right things, and put them in a better position to win versus setting them up to actually lose.
And then, of course, you did whatever time you did and were incarcerated.
I did 13 years in federal prison, yes.
And I'm now wondering, after all of that time in incarceration, what was like for you then when you actually got out? Okay,
so I've been incarcerated on 2 occasions. And so the first time I went in with a 10-year sentence, and the second time I went in with a 6-year and 2-month sentence. So there's when I got out the first time is totally different from when I got out the second time. Okay, so life after the first time that I got out, it was because I didn't plan. I only had one plan the first time, and that was to get out of prison. And when I reached that goal, that was my goal, to get out of prison. And when I reached that goal, I had nothing else to reach for because I didn't prepare nor did I train for anything else. So I automatically, when it came time to be called to the cloth, like, what are you going to do? I remember saying the words when somebody said, what are you doing? And my reply was, I'm doing what I know how to do. And what did I know how to do? I knew how to do those things that I seen that had set me up to ultimately lose. So I did not prepare myself nor get myself in a position to win on that first time going to prison. So life, getting out at that point, life was pretty much what it was before I went in because I didn't plan for anything. My mindset wasn't different. I just had one goal, and that was to get out of prison. So now I go back in, and I'm facing my second time around. I'm facing a mandatory life sentence. And I can't give this without sharing with you basically how I ended up in the position that I ended up in. And that was, so I was a young person, younger, and I had walked And I had begun to trust God and gain a relationship with God on my first time in prison. Well, I got upset with God because I couldn't understand him, and I couldn't understand why I had to do the amount of time that I had done with insufficient evidence of what I'd done. I never dispute the fact or negate that I had sold drugs. So yes, I did that. But the fact that I always say that the authorities cheated to get me, and there was false documents. So I trust God to bring out at least the truth in that. So when I didn't understand him, I shared with him and I told him, this is how I'm going to do things. And I said, my exact words were, I'm no longer campaigning for you because I don't understand you. But if somebody asks me, I tell them the truth. However, now let's fast forward back to my second time, going into my second time of being incarcerated. Well, when I got arrested, because I was out for 3 years, and I had began to, after those 3 years, because I was upset, I couldn't get no good job or nothing like that. Within the last year, I got a good job. So once I got this good job, which was paying me at the time, and that was in 2013, like right at $15 an hour. So I had began to move away from the lifestyle of the selling drugs. Actually, I hadn't sold drugs at least 8 months prior to being arrested. And so I had even been asked to speak to the youth, and I had spoke openly in front of a congregation for like 3 months in a row. So when I get arrested and I'm doing the right things now, I'm working, I'm finding my way back in my relationship with God. When I get arrested, the first thing that comes out of my mouth, and I'm like this in handcuffs, and it's a federal charge because I know that I'm not going home anytime soon. And I say, God, what is going on? And his words was, do you still trust me? And at that point I was like, oh man, yes, not another one of these. The last time I trust you, I went and did 10 years, so much for trusting. But yes, I do trust you. So I think that's a very valuable point to see at least how I began to lead up to my second time out. So when I go back in, I do things differently than I done them when the first time. Mm-hmm. At this point, I knew that it was real. I was 40 years old going back in. There were certain areas in my life that I had grown, and I wanted the opportunity to explore life on the right side. Mm-hmm. And so I made up my mind that I would no longer surround myself with, like, as they call them, the homeboys in prison. I would do all that I could in order to be the best that I could if I ever made it out of this situation, which is a mandatory life sentence that I was facing. So at that point, I began to say, how can I offer what I did not have? That end up getting me in this situation. Like, how can I be an assistance to the community and help those not go through what I had to go through? And so I began to work on the surrounding myself with doctors, lawyers, politicians, things of those nature, so that I could glean from them. And in the midst of me gleaning from them, I began to write out my plans. And as I wrote out my plans, they helped me understand writing out a business proposal. They helped me understand how to format the things that I wanted so that when I presented them, they made sense. And they just continued to breathe in me. And I learned, I took Microsoft Office while I was in prison. So I continued to build myself up. And now I created 3 business plans when I was in there. So the difference, we're already leading up to the difference, which is I now have a plan after incarceration versus just having one goal, which was to get out of prison. So now I stepped out of prison, all right, after doing these 5 years. And within those 5 years, I came up with the BRAVE effect. And BRAVE is an acronym for Building Relationships and Valuable Encounters. And what I had realized is while I was in the streets and in my criminal activity, we live in a box. We live in a box, and we are in our own secret society. We don't trust anybody on the outside. We don't need anything from them. They're all the opposition, and we are all that we need. Well, however, that hadn't landed me nowhere but in prison, for over the past 20 plus years. So at this point, I see how valuable it is to create these relationships and come outside, break the walls of that box down. I would no longer allow myself or anybody else to have me in a box or live in a box where I'm not being the best version of me that I can be. And so now, what do I have? I step out, and I wish if I thought about it, I didn't know the questions, I would have brought my binder. So in this binder, I brought it all the way from prison, and it has 3 business plans in it. And so what I always tell people is this is my blueprint, because I always know where I'm going because I refer back to the blueprint. And I give them the analogy, an architect will never build a structure, begin to put that structure together without a blueprint, no matter how experienced he is. So I had a blueprint, and I just continue to follow the blueprint. Whenever I may get in a position where I need to know exactly where I'm going or what to do next, or I go back to this binder, and it's still in the same form that it was when I left prison.
Joe, what would you say have been the biggest challenges for you from that second time that you came out to being really successful as you are now?
I always go to the mindset, and I have to challenge that. And I often use my tactics for doing time. What do I mean when I say my tactics for doing time? Because my biggest challenges is those that I love the most. And I often say they don't know how to. Everybody wants the new guy, the guy to come home and not get back in trouble and not live that lifestyle. But if that's the only person that they've ever lived with, then they don't know how to live with this new person. They don't know how to live with this person now that I have morals, values, and I have structure, because I've never lived with that before. I always go with the flow and end up wherever the wind will land me. However, now I'm structured. I have morals, and that I will not break. So a lot of my biggest challenges, it comes within those that I love the most, because they clearly they don't understand the transition, and where I show them grace is a lot of times I have to learn how to live with the new me. So I'm sure it could be challenging if I'm expecting them to live with the new me.